for each of our panelists. And so we're going to take a chance here and see what they have to say in our envelopes, if I can pull this off. All right. So the first one is Betty McIntosh. What hula hoop champion wannabe brings more than 20 years of experience in assisting major U.S. and international clients with strategic location and expansion decisions? Betty McIntosh. Oh, you are a hula hoop champion. I'm sorry, that's true. But Betty's client list reads like a who's who list of most recognized brands in the U.S. And she is a friend of Georgia's, and usually 2 or 3 times a year there's an announcement in Georgia for Betty's name attached to it. So thank you for joining us, Betty. All right, the next one is Jeff Rosset. Jeff Rosset. All right. I don't do this as well as Johnny did. Who has 8 years experience in corporate location advisory services with Deloitte in Chicago, based in Chicago, lives in Cedar Rapids, and has experience in 29 states and 9 countries? That would be Jeff Rosset. Jeff's background is very diverse, and he's another one of those fence jumpers who's been on the consulting side and the economic development side. I can relate to that. And he's made a successful transition from the ED side back over to consulting. And last, but certainly not least, is Charlie Gatlin. Charlie Gatlin. Curious, aren't you? What economic development rock star, in more ways than one, has over 37 years in economic development experience in Georgia, including Deputy Commissioner of Global Commerce, Tourism, and External Affairs? That would be Charlie Gatlin. And this is just an editorial comment as well, but Charlie's such a valuable asset to Georgia's economic development community. I think we all recognize that with his institutional knowledge and his familiarity with our state. So what a great group of folks. Wiley, congratulations to you and your team for pulling this group together. So why, at least once a year, do we sit down to talk and listen to what consultants have to say? These are the folks who have their fingers on the pulse of what's going on out there in relation to economic development activity. And when a consultant, with as esteemed as these folks are, and with organizations like these, call with a project opportunity, you know it's real. You know it's viable and it's credible. And so the opportunity to hear from these folks today is real, because Betty has active projects right now in the state. I was talking with Jeff. He personally is working 2 in the state right now, and their team out of Chicago, roughly 4 or 5 projects as well. So we know that they know Georgia. So to get us started, I'm going to start at sort of the 50,000-foot level, and then we're going to start to drill down a little bit. I'm going to ask each person a question, set them up. 5 minutes, sort of max, to share their thoughts. And then I want to make sure that you guys have opportunities to ask questions as well. Certainly, if we run out of time during this session, maybe a little time afterwards, you can visit with these folks. So I want to start with Betty. And, Betty is extremely active, like I said earlier, in the state and works a number of projects across the U.S. What sort of trends, Betty, are you seeing in terms of project activity, the types of projects, and what do you think is driving?
Well, Jonathan, can y'all hear me? First of all, 5 minutes, I can hardly say hi, y'all.
Well, I know that to be true. So I'll put my hand over
Okay,
yours.
all right. Just kind of bump me when I get too long, but, you know, it's exciting times. I was telling the people at my table, I'm as busy as I've ever been, and I've been doing this work for 24 years. It is exciting to see the economy coming back. I know everyone's not feeling it, but, you know, we hear about projects when it's a gleam in someone's eye. There's a lot of pent-up demand because companies are taking longer to make a decision, and then, of course, when they do, it was yesterday when they needed to do what they're doing. But we're seeing so much variety. You know, in our business, on the global business consulting side for Cushman, we support our brokers, and it's just as economic development is, it's a relationship business. So I have friends in the brokerage community all over the world now, and they bring me in on different types of projects. So we've got anything from major headquarters projects to advanced manufacturing to back office. I've got a not-for-profit that I'm working on, you know, lots and lots of things going on, and a lot of activity, a lot of movement. You're seeing companies that have survived the recession, a lot of money in the coffers of these businesses. You know, if they were strong and they held onto their cash. And if you look at balance sheets across public companies and a lot of other companies, there's a lot of money out there. They need to do something with that money. They can stay dormant, they can survive without investment in creation of jobs, but they can't be competitive. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is companies are getting their head out of the sand. They're going, we need to make investment. We need to grow our manufacturing presence. We need to open another market. We need to rethink our workspace. Lots of things going on.
Anybody want to add to that, basically what you're seeing on project activity?
Well, first of all, I'm not worthy to sit up here with these two, so I would say, actually, I echo everything Betty said. We're seeing a little bit more from our standpoint on the technology and IT side. Again, companies flush with cash. They're also now looking for that particular talent. We're involved in a few cybersecurity related projects, which is something a little bit new and different. Internationally, we're seeing the emerging markets locations shift a little bit. China's costs have gone up, Brazil's costs have gone up. So there's others that are being viewed a little bit more frequently, although they have their own issues. We're seeing a little bit more on reshoring. It's not a huge wave, but you are seeing some of this. The key with that though is we're going to be competing against Mexico as that reshore option. We're still seeing quite a bit of activity, so very similar to Betty. It's across the board. It's across the board.
Sure. Charlie, what about in Georgia? Your knowledge of the projects that the team's working.
You know, activity is finally picking up. I feel like we're getting back to whatever normal might be, so to speak. I don't remember having this many major projects all at once. Occasionally you have one or two a year, but it seems like there are 4 or 5 that we're working on all at one time, which is a little daunting, but it's okay. We've got a great team, we've got a great family, as you know, and we'll get there. We'll run as fast as people want to run, and we'll do what we need to do.
Great. All right, so let's transition to you, Jeff. It's becoming more and more competitive in this industry and in this business. And for communities to be competitive and to avoid elimination in the site location process, they've got to demonstrate that they have the assets for what it takes. So specifically on the phone last week, you mentioned an issue around workforce and talent and the ability to be able to demonstrate that a community can either deliver or help to create a pipeline for that. So is this, I got 4 questions for you, but you can wrap them all up in your 3 to 5 minutes, okay?
You don't know me well, do you?
So is this indeed a serious issue? Is it isolated to certain regions around the country? And if so, so what are some of the areas where talent issues are, and are there some best practices out there that some states and communities are doing?
Okay, the answer is yes, it is an issue. No, it's not going away. There's a great phrase that a colleague of mine used last week, and I'm going to steal it here. And that is, land without people is North Dakota. Okay? So, they themselves have a talent issue up there. And this is something to be recognized. Now, they've got reasons for that. But the reality is that our clients, regardless of the level of skill that they are looking for their facilities, they are increasing that expectation almost on a daily basis. So what we would have historically considered even lower skilled production level jobs, the expectation of these folks is increasing hand over fist. And it's the technology that these production workers have to learn and adopt and continue to evolve with that's causing this issue, because the technology is evolving faster than the training mechanisms and the talent can adapt to typically. We find this not just here in Georgia or the Southeast, this is a national issue. I forgot the other place.
No, that's
So the other,
best practices.
the best practices, we were talking about this actually at the board meeting earlier, and that is the drive and the demand for this talent is forcing the expectation that students in the K through 12 systems are learning the right skills early. So first of all, I want to make sure I talk about this, the soft skills. These are critical. These are absolutely critical, and they do affect the bottom line of a company. If you don't have employees coming in on time, that's an issue. If you have employees that can't work together on a production line or in an office setting, that's an issue. These things are real. And so to the extent that you can work with, not only internally in your communities, but with your K through 12 systems and the technical schools, to hopefully develop a soft skilled program for these individuals, they need to understand what collaboration really is and coming to work on time. Now, that seems very simple, but it's also very, very real. Other best practices, we were talking about this again earlier. There are a number of examples, and frankly, a couple of them do come from my home state, so I'm not necessarily biased, but they are pretty effective. And that is, if anybody here has heard of Project Lead the Way, or First Tech Challenge, or the Lego League, those are 3 independent entities and movements to help get kids engaged in the STEM-related learning experiences, so science, technology, engineering, and math. Those are critical moving forward to build the next generation of talent. And even things as simple as welding. If you look at where welding as a profession and what's required of that requires now, you can look at where that could tie back in through the K through 12 system, to everything going back to even the Lego League situation. So there's some best practices that are being developed and deployed in certain states, and those are some of them that really wouldn't take a significant amount of change or implementation for the school systems to impact economic development. I'll cut with my 5 minutes.
No, that's very good. Eddie, would you weigh in on this? Because I know a lot of the projects that you work have a variety of different skill sets.
They do, and I think it's one of the most interesting things that I've run across. I've got a client that is a legacy manufacturer, and they have facilities all over the U.S. They have an aging workforce, as many of these manufacturers do. They've had they're tremendously successful with their existing workforce. Turnover is very low. They've got people who are like employee number 1 and 2 in plants that have been there 30 and 40 years. Obviously, they are retiring, and in the past, they've had tremendous success recruiting family members. So you'll have 2 and 3 generations of families represented at the factory. Well, those days, they can recruit. They say they're not having an issue recruiting, but what they are having an issue is maintaining those jobs. These young people start, they think they're gung-ho, they train them for 3 months, and they leave. They don't want to do it. They're not, whether it's the work's too hard, whether the technology is more than they thought, but this is a pervasive issue all over the U.S. And we think about technology being a shortage, and that's true. But if we want manufacturing to come back to this country, we are going to have to address this issue. Career tech, career academy, you know, the old tech track where kids learn that there's nothing wrong with doing manufacturing, industrial type of work, that it's really a good opportunity for them. And I think there was a kind of a switch that no one wanted to do it because they thought the jobs were going to be there. Well, as you were saying about, you know, the changing in offshore opportunities, what's going on, you know, one of the things, Mexico is becoming a really popular place. Automotive's big in Mexico now. A lot of other industries going to Mexico because there's not that much differential between Mexico and China anymore like there was. And there are a lot of other factors involved. And even though we certainly can compete with Mexico, the other thing that's important is that something that's made in Mexico is 4 times more likely to have other U.S. component parts than something made in China. So it's going to be a trickle down, you know, or a trickle up. And so we've got to help these young people start early. You know, junior high school, I was in Virginia in a town that's known for its manufacturing, and I sat in on an internship program they had that started in the middle school. And these were 8th and 9th graders, and the local advanced manufacturing jobs, they brought these kids in and worked them in the summer and had monthly meetings with them. I mean, it was a tremendous program and exciting because a lot of these kids, some of them were going to go on into engineering, but still very, very interested in manufacturing. Some of them won't go on to, you know, more than maybe a tech school 2 year, but they've got that background and they've got some real skills that they can learn.
That's right. You know, I really liked your answer, Jeff, on the soft skills piece. And we've seen some good examples. I seem to remember my last trip to Moultrie and the local technical school there, walking through the main lobby there, those programs that are in place, and I'm sure that's occurring across our state, but placing an emphasis on that is really important. One of our team members is working a project, and I was very surprised to hear it's in a southeastern state. I won't name the state, but it's a relatively new manufacturing facility, and the anecdotal stories from the company is that roughly 80% of their applicant pool cannot pass a drug test. And they're now questioning their decision to locate in that operation because their pipeline is shrinking and their expansion opportunity is not nearly as great. So it's not just those hard skills, but it's the other facets of life as well. Charlie, let's transition to you. And how important is it for states and communities to have product in the form of buildings and sites in the site location process? And as a tag onto that, is it important for sites to be certified officially to get looks?
Good question, Jonathan. It would be more fun if I had a guitar up here with a microphone. No, that's a great question. When I was on in the local ED scene, I wanted to have as many options as I could have to present to people, because you get so many different requests for various pieces of product. And so, you know, I think, again, workforce is important. We were doing a rehearsal for a major project the other day talking about workforce, and we showed a map and it looked like a bunch of crop circles on it. And we were thinking, this is really what we have to start off with the client, because they don't know Georgia. They don't know the communities. And again, it's the same thing with product. Most of them, somebody may know Atlanta, so to speak, but they don't really know our other communities. And so the product of real estate is important. Can I put a facility there? And if I do you have something you can show me? So if you have a building, that's great. And sites are, again, remember a few years ago we had this debate about the grad program, right? And in the debate we said, how do we start? do we start with a certification program, or do we start with a site development program? And the debate finally ended up, we need a site development program, a basic fundamental thing that you would do for a piece of real estate, no matter what you want to call it. So we ended up with GRAD, Georgia Ready for Accelerated Development, rather than using the term certification. So really what we have is a site development program. And we've got, I think now at last count, 33 that have been certified, or 36. There's a lot rolling in, I'm losing count of this. But the point is, this is a program that if you were on the local scene, you'd be doing this to certify, that's the wrong word, to certify the real estate that you have, so that one of your colleagues said to me, I don't care what you call it, just give me what I need for my client, right? And so when you hand over this huge notebook that has documented all the features of your property, that's really what we're talking about, so that somebody can see, gosh, you've already done wetlands inventory, geotechnical, endangered species reports, phase one, availability, ownership, all those things that the GRAD program requires are basic things. And so I'm hoping that people will get excited about that. And then one day soon, we want to kick it up a notch and get to a real certification program. So stay tuned for that.
Good, Charlie. So Jeff, as an outsider who has done work in 29 states and 9 countries, how about weighing in on that? I mean, having product, how critical is it? And then on the certification, or pad ready or site ready or whatever you want to call it, will that eliminate you?
Shovel ready.
Shovel ready.
You may still get invited to the dance, so to speak, if you don't have that, but ultimately, you're not gonna get the first base. And you're not gonna, you need to have that. The expectations of clients these days is that the risk on a site or with a site is known and or mitigated, or has a process to mitigate. And by getting these studies, these documents taken care of, you then your property, and that shows a client that you're serious. The days, frankly, of showing a piece of farm ground, if you will, and saying, we can develop this over the next 6 to 12 months potentially, does not suit our clients' timelines. It may for some companies, but for a majority of what we're seeing, that is not acceptable. I don't actually care what you call it. There are about 12 studies and documents that we want to see for that site, and that's ultimately going to drive that decision. Now, again, going back to what I said though, if you have land but you don't have labor, you have North Dakota. On the flip side of that, if you have labor but no land, you're Rhode Island, okay? You want a balance of this. You want a balance of this, and you have to have a product. I mean, how can you market economic development to attract investment if you don't have something in place, whether building the land for a client to work on? This is a pretty simple equation. We understand that there's also cost involved in that, and there's risk on your part. But if you're not willing to take that risk, then why are you involved? That's kind of our perspective on it. And I would say, actually, in the U.S., the Southeast does a tremendous job of this. Georgia has a little bit of work to do as a whole. That's one thing that we would love to see more of, is product that is at that level of having all the documentation. But it's better than it was, and it's going in the right direction.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Betty, any closing thoughts there?
Yeah, again, I agree with both Charlie and Jeff. You have to have something to make the list to begin with. Projects, and I have a saying, they're never over till they're over. And as you know, projects take on a life of their own. You think they're heading in one direction, and the next thing you know, the whole thing's upside down because a site became available, or the CEO changed his mind, or things happen. But you've got to get someone to look at you as a community, and to do that, it may not be the site, but that gets them there. And it also shows, as Jeff said, that you've made an investment. And remember my first comment, what we're seeing is everyone wants everything yesterday. And I know you're feeling this from the economic development side when you have to respond to these RFPs. But this initial work of certifying, or whatever you want to call it, of getting that work done on a just eliminates that risk, and then you're not gonna fall off the list just because you don't have something done and they don't feel like they've got time. Now, as I like to tell clients, they'll ask me, well, how long does this process take? Can you get this done? We're in a hurry. And my response as a consultant trying to get engaged is, with a very sheepish grin on my face on the other end of the phone, is we will not be the holdup on the project. Because we all know it's usually the client, but they in their minds think that they're going to make these decisions just like that. And so you've got to have this work done on the site in order to stay on the list.
Great. Great discussion. Now, Wiley, I was told to wrap this up by about 2:30, right? Okay. So let's open it up to the audience for a couple questions. We'll see how it goes. When people start walking up, getting up and walking out, then we'll wrap it up here shortly. But I think there'll be some availability here. So we got a question.
Jeff, would you repeat those 3 programs again for any kids interested in?
Yes, it's Project Lead the Way, and then there's First Tech Challenge, and then the last one is generically known as Lego League, and Lego as in the Lego blocks. And it actually can be pretty involved and pretty intense, but again, this is a way to work with the schools to get kids energized about science, technology, engineering, and math.
Great question. Another one. Back here, Peggy.
Since we've got rural development cuts on our table, and that is always our biggest challenge and any state's biggest challenge. What industries do you see active that are amenable to looking at less developed areas? And then what should those rural communities do to stand out?
So the question is, what can be done by less developed communities, more rural communities, to get more looks? And she referenced the cups that are sitting on the table here. John?
So I'll take this because I've actually been in a position at a state level in economic development where a majority of my clientele was rural in nature. What we're seeing, first of all, is food processing. Depending on the industry sector and the geography, things like tier 2, tier 3 automotive, aerospace, where does fit well within the state of Georgia. What you really need to look at is the size of the labor pool, the size of the community, and the size of the project that would actually align with the data related to that, meaning the demographics, et cetera. For communities of, I'll just say 5,000 people, an auto plant is not likely going to be there just because of that particular community. One thing though that communities and rural areas can do though, and this is really critical for community development, and that is a vibrant community, cleanliness, beautiful programs, making sure that your education systems are strong and tied together. Those things resonate with our clients, even regardless of rural and urban. They want to know that they're locating their facility in a community that's vibrant, that wants them, and has opportunity to grow with them. I mean, honestly, it's no different than if we were looking to build a house somewhere. Are you going to build it in a really good neighborhood or a really bad neighborhood? No, it's pretty straightforward. But we're seeing more on the food processing side related to that at this point, and then manufacturing, assembly.
And I would say the same thing, and I think what's interesting too is for smaller communities, you always hear communities say we're very close to our existing industry. But then when you start talking to them about it, not necessarily so. They may be very, very good friends with the local plant manager. Well, I can tell you that local plant manager thinks he's making or she's making a lot of the decisions that are going on. They're not. You know, everyone in a company that has multi-facilities, everybody's vying for the same capital dollars. And so you want to stay close to that local, but you need to go visit headquarters. You know, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in Chicago, wherever it is, go and visit, court those people, because that helps make it a personal decision. You think you've got it covered with the local people. They obviously obviously have a vested interest in staying there and in their plant growing. Corporate doesn't. I mean, they've got so many dollars, they want the best return on their investment. And so to help them understand that and stay close, I mean, that is your best calling card. Two reasons. One, if a company that has no ties to your community comes in, who are they gonna talk with? The companies that are already there. So you've got to have that relationship. But secondly, you're much more likely, there's a reason that company's there. And if you stay close to them, particularly right now, because we're seeing people make investments in existing industry. You know, they are, I'm hearing the term every day, modernizing equipment, so that what they're doing is maybe not adding jobs, but they're retaining the jobs they have, and they're putting more dollars in investment in equipment, so that that plant can continue running for the next 20 or 30 years. And so, to me, that is the key for rural development, is to stay close to your existing industry, and then all the things, as Jeff said, make it a welcoming community, and don't brush the issues under the table. There is no one, I remember working a Canadian project right outside of Toronto, company, they were looking in the southeast for U.S. presence, and the economic development person in the community where they were strongly looking was apologizing for the school system, was apologizing for certain things. And the Canadians told me, they said, Betty, half our workforce in Toronto, we have classes for remedial reading. They can't read it past what you would call an 8th grade level. So it's a pervasive issue all over the world. And it's not to apologize that you've got an issue, it's to tell people, what are you doing about it? You know, what are the plans? How do you move forward? And any community can do that. Any community can do that.
Great. Another, Bob?
Over the last year, we've been justifiably proud in touting Georgia's reputation as a business-friendly state and having the best business climate from a lot of groups, and including site consultants. In your estimation, particularly for Betty and for Jeff, what is Georgia doing right from that perspective, and where do we have some room to grow, and how can we improve on the other side?
So a quick repeat of the question, if you didn't hear it in the back. Georgia has received a number of accolades over the last year or two about the business climate, favorable locations to do business. What are we doing right? And then what are some areas that may be some challenges that we need to overcome?
Well, let me start. I think Georgia does a lot of things right. You know, I laugh. Sometimes I talk to my colleagues in other parts of the country, and we talk about economic development, and in some parts of the country, that is an oxymoron. They're, you know, compared to what we are spoiled in the South. You guys do a great job. Georgia does a great job. The Allies, I think, is just one of the strongest things. You know, it's seamless. You know, you may air your dirty laundry among yourselves, but the client doesn't see it. There's generally one point of contact. I think that's really important. There's so many regional organizations all over the place. I never know who's on first and who's doing what and what are they bringing to the table and why do I have to go through these people and why aren't you talking to these other people who say they're doing the same thing? And I don't see that in Georgia, and I think that's very, very powerful. I think it is a business-friendly community. I think, you know, on the incentive side, the incentives are straightforward. And what I think is one of the best things is the idea that we can get offer letters and you sign off on those letters and then you do the legal papering afterward, because that's the way businesses make decisions. They can't wait until your board meets necessarily to get approval of something before they internally make a decision. And, you know, it's, in some states, it's like you can't go to the board until the minute we give you approval, you have to announce you're coming here. Well, if the incentive is truly driving the decision, then how does that work? I mean, you've got to have made that decision, and everyone knows you made it, and then then the company feels disingenuous because you have to kind of play this game where everybody knows they have made that decision, but it was based on getting those incentives. But it's, you know, and I think that Georgia does a great job because you don't have that craziness, you know, and certain things, and you have to get for the development authority approval and that sort of thing, but the state is very nimble. I think one of the things that I will say that I've had some issue with, and I think it depends on the community, I think it depends on a lot of things, but I've seen some of the smaller projects fall off the wayside, not get quite the attention. And it's gotta be relative, I understand that. But I can recall one project, Spanish company, this guy, if I'm stepping on any toes, I apologize, but this guy came over, he's president of the company, he was involved, they had ownership in 37 companies in Spain. He was close to the president of Spain. I mean, his picture were in magazines with this person. And what we heard was, well, it's just 30 jobs. Well, let me tell you, Governor Haley over in South Carolina got on the phone, wooed this guy, made him feel like he was a big thing, which was a big deal. And now they have about 6 companies that he's attracted. And their mode was that, you know, they started small, they were profitable from the get-go, and they expanded every time they hit a certain mark, and they grew their business that way. And so that's one of the complaints, and I've seen it happen in other cases, that it's hard to get the attention. And like I say, I mean, we're smart enough to know you've got a lot of irons in the fire, but that was very hurtful to me because I wanted to say, no, you don't understand. This is not just this one little company. There's a whole lot of other things that are coming if you get them. And this was their first U.S. presence, first U.S. facility.
Jeff, yeah, let's do your
Just a quick
flyover.
Just a quick comment on this. I would say, first of all, what we like is you're stable. Okay, there is a consistency in this state for many, many years that we and our clients appreciate. I don't talk disparagingly usually about other states, but I will say this. Look at what's going on in North Carolina. That is not necessarily a positive from our perspective in terms of what they're doing to revamp their economic development up there. Okay? That takes away the consistency and the community and the connectivity that we have. The things to improve on, there are a couple of things related to incentives. We view you as average, frankly, kind of across the board for incentives. It's not a bad thing. It also plays into the stability aspect of it. But we do think there are a few things that as you move forward and you evolve your economy, especially related to manufacturing, we think there are some things that can be done legislatively and responsibly that could enhance that. And we're actually talking to the state a little bit about that these days. So, you know, overall, I would say we agree that you are a great state to do business in. We're concerned a little bit about the overall cost structures that we're seeing, but again, that's also a reflection of the types of industries you're having come in. You're not the low-cost location in the Southeast, nor should you be necessarily. What we want to see is that you take that talent side of things again, marry that with your business climate, and package that collectively as a value proposition.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, out of respect for everyone's time, and we're bumping up on 1:30, let me wrap this up, and if you got a question, grab them as soon as they walk off the stage. And nobody has a flight anytime soon. But let's again thank Charlie, Jeff, and Betty for their time.
Thank y'all again, I really appreciate it, and just as I know we're running up on being done, so just as a small token of y'all being here and talking to us today, we have made a donation on each of the speakers' behalf to Read Across Georgia, which is First Lady Deal's philanthropy, so
Thank you.
thank you again, we really appreciate it, and Angie,